Hello everybody, welcome back to Ash's Glitter Factory. Today I'll be reading Clockwork Angel by Cassandra Clare. This is the start of a new series. I'm going to be reading a bunch of Cassandra Clare's books. This is Clockwork Angel is from the Infernal Devices, and this is book 1 of 3, I think. The little note on the inside: magic is dangerous, but love is more dangerous still. When Tessa Gray crosses the ocean to find her brother, her destination is England. The time is the reign of Queen Victoria, and something terrifying is waiting for her in London's downworld, where vampires, werewolves, and other supernatural folk stalk the gaslit streets. Only the Shadowhunters warriors dedicated to ridding the world of demons keep order amidst the chaos. Kidnapped by the mysterious Dark Sisters, who are members of a secret organization called the Pandemonium Club, Tessa soon learns that she herself is a downworlder with a rare ability, empowered to transform at will into another person. What's more, the Magister, the shadowy figure who runs the club, will stop at nothing to claim Tessa's power for his own. Friendless and haunted, Tessa takes refuge with the Shadowhunters of London Institute, who swear to find her brother if she will use her power to help them. She soon finds herself fascinated by and torn between two best friends, James, whose fragile beauty hides a deadly secret, and Blue-Eyed Will, whose caustic wit and violent mood keep everyone in his life at arm's length. Everyone, that is, but Tessa. As her search draws them deep into the heart of an arcane plot that threatens to destroy the Shadowhunters, Tessa realizes that she may need to choose between saving her brother and helping her new friends inside the world, and that love may be the most dangerous magic of all. Okay, that was the little intro. Now we'll get started. Fame's River Song. A note of salt slips in and the river rises, darkening to the color of tea, swelling to meet the green. Above its banks the cogs and wheels of monstrous machines. Clank and spin, the ghost of Finn vanishes into its coils, whispering mysteries. Each tiny golden cog is teeth, each great wheel moves a pair of hands which take the water from the river, devour it, convert it into steam, corrode the great machine to run on the force of its dissolution. Gently the tide is rising, corrupting the mechanism. Salt rusts and silt, slowing the gears down at the banks, and iron tanks sway into their moorings with the hollow boom of a gigantic bell of drum and cannon which draw out in a tongue of thunder, and the river rolls under by Elka Cloak. Prologue. London, April 1878. The demon exploded in a shower of ichor and guts. William Herondel jerked back the dagger he was holding, but it was too late. The vicious acid of the demon's blood had already begun to eat away at the shining blade. He swore and tossed the weapon aside. It landed in a filthy puddle and commenced smoldering like a dull match. The demon itself, of course, had vanished, smashed back to whatever hellish world it had come from, though not without leaving a mess behind. "Jem!" Will called, turning around. "Where are you? Did you see that? Killed it with one blow. Not bad, eh?" But there was no answer to Will's shout. His hunting partner had been standing behind him in the damp and crooked street a few moments before, guarding his back. Will looked positive, but now Will was alone in the shadows. He found it annoying. It was much less fun showing off without Jem to show off to. He glanced behind him to where the street narrowed into a passage that gave onto the black, heaving water of the Thames in the distance. Through the gap, Will could see the dark outlines of docked ships, a forest of masts like a leafless orchard. No Jem there. Perhaps he had gone back to the narrow street in search of better illumination. With a shrug, Will headed back the way he came. Narrow street cut across Limehouse, between the docks, beside the river, and the cramped slums, spreading west towards Whitechapel. It was as narrow as its name suggested, lined with warehouses and lopsided wooden buildings. At the moment it was deserted. Even the drunk staggering home from the grapes up the road had found somewhere to collapse for the night. Will liked Limehouse, liked the feeling of being on the edge of the world, where ships left each day for unimaginably far ports, That the area was a sailor's haunt and consequently full of gambling hells, opium dens, and brothels didn't hurt either. It was easy to lose yourself in a place like this. He didn't even mind the smell of it. Smoke and rope and tar, foreign spices mixed with dirty river water, the smell of the flames. Looking up and down the empty street, he scrubbed the sleeve of his coat across his face, trying to rub away the ichor that stung and burned his skin. The cloth came away stained, green and black. There was a cut on the back of his hand, too, a nasty one. He could use a healing rune, one of Charlotte's preferably. She was particularly good at drilling ire tats. A shape detached itself from the shadows and moved towards Will. He started forward, then paused. It wasn't Jem, but rather a mundane policeman wearing a bell-shaped helmet, a heavy overcoat, and a puzzled expression. He stared at Will, or rather, through Will. However accustomed Will had become to glamour, it was always strange to be looked through, as if he wasn't there. Will was seized with the sudden urge to grab the policeman's trudged around and watched while the man flapped around, trying to figure out where it had gone, but Jem had scolded him the few times he'd done that before, and while Will never really could understand Jem's objections to the whole enterprise, it wasn't worth making him upset. With a shrug and a blink, the policeman moved past Will, shaking his head and muttering something under his breath about swearing off the gin, and before he truly started seeing things, Will stepped aside to let the man pass, then raised his voice to shout, "James Carstairs! Jem! Where are you, you disloyal bastard?" This time, a faint reply answered him. "Over here, follow the witchlight." Will moved towards the sound of Jem's voice. It seemed to be coming from a dark opening between two warehouses. A faint gleam was visible within the shadows, like the darting light of a will-o'-the-wisp. "Did you hear me before? That shack demon thought it could get me with bloody great pincers when I cornered in an alley." "Yes, I heard you." The young man who appeared at the mouth of the alley was pale in the lamplight, paler even than he usually was, which was quite pale indeed. He was bareheaded, which drew the eye immediately to his hair. It was an odd bright silver color, like an untarnished shilling. His eyes were the same silver, and his fine-bone face was angular, the slight curve of his eyes the only clue to his heritage. There were dark stains across his white shirt front, and his hands were thickly smeared with red. "Well, Tess, you're bleeding. What happened?" Jem made the way Will was concerned. "It's not my blood." He turned his head back towards the alley behind him. "It's hers." Will glanced past his friend into the thicker shadows of the alley. Into the far corner of it was a crumpled shape, only a shadow in the darkness, but when Will looked closely, he could make out a shape of a pale hand and a wisp of fair hair. "A dull woman?" Will asked. "A mundane?" "A girl, really, not more than 14. At that, Will cursed with great volume and expression. Jem waited patiently for him to be done. If we'd only happened along a little earlier," Will said. "Finally, that bloody demon." "That's the peculiar thing. I don't think this was the demon's work," Jem frowned. "Shack's demons are parasites, blood parasites. It would have wanted to drag its victim back to its lair to lay eggs in her skin when she was still alive, but this girl, she was stabbed, repeatedly, and I don't think it was here, either. There simply isn't enough blood in this alley. I think she was attacked elsewhere, and she dragged herself here to die of her injuries. But the Shack's demon... I'm telling you, I don't think it was the Shack's. I think the Shack's was pursuing her, hunting her down for something or someone else. Shack's have a keen sense of scent," Will allowed. "I've heard of warlocks using them to follow the tracks of missing, and it did seem to be moving with an odd sort of purpose." He looked past Jem at the pitiful smallness of the crumpled shape in the alley. "You didn't find the weapon, did you?" "Here." Jem drew something from inside his jacket, a knife wrapped in a white cloth. "It's a sort of misericord, or hunting dagger. Look how thin the blade is." Will took it. The blade was indeed thin, ending in a handle made of polished bone. The blade and hilt were both were stained with dried blood. With a frown he wiped the flat of the knife across the rough fabric of his sleeve, scraping it clean until a symbol burned into the blade became visible. Two serpents, each biting the other's tail, forming a perfect circle. "Ouroboros," Jem said, leaning in close to start the knife. "A double one, now. What do you think that means?" "The end of the world," said Will, still looking at the dagger. A small smile playing about his mouth. "And the beginning," Jem frowned. "I understand the symbology, William. I meant, what do you think its presence on the dagger signifies?" The wind at the river was ruffling Will's hair. He brushed it off his eyes with an impatient gesture. Not a warlock or downworlder one. That usually means humans. The foolish, mundane sort who think trafficking in magic is the ticket for gaining wealth and fame. The sort who usually end up in a pile of bloody rags inside some pentagram. Jem sounded grim. The sort who like to lurk about the downworld parts of our fair city, After wrapping the handkerchief around the blade carefully, Will slipped it into his jacket pocket. Do you think Charlotte will let me handle the investigation? Do you think you can be trusted in the downworld? The gambling hells, the den of magical vice, the woman of loose morals? Will smiled the way Lucifer might have smiled moments before he fell from heaven. Would tomorrow be too early to start looking, do you think? Jem sighed. Do what you like, William. You always do. Southampton, May. Tessa could not remember a time when she had not loved the Clockwork Angel. It had belonged to her mother once, and her mother had been wearing it when she died. After that, it sat in her mother's jewelry box, until her brother Nathaniel took it out one day to see if it was still in working order. The angel was no bigger than Tessa's pinky finger, a tiny statuette made of brass with folded bronze wings no larger than a cricket's. It had a delicate metal face with a shut crescent eyelids and hands crossed over a sword in front. A thin chain that looped beneath the wings allowed the angel to be worn around the neck like a locket. Tessa knew the angel was made of clockwork because if she lifted it to her ear, she could hear the sound of its machinery, like the sound of a watch. Nate had exclaimed in surprise that it was still working in order after so many years, and he had looked in vain for a knob or a screw or some other method by which the angel might be wound, but there had been nothing to find. With a shrug, he had given the angel to Tessa. From that moment, she had never taken it off. Even at night, the angel lay against her chest as she slept, its constant tick-tock, like the beating of a second heart. She held it now, clutched between her fingers as the Maine nosed its way between other massive steamships to find a spot at Southampton Dock. Nate had insisted that she come to Southampton instead of Liverpool, their most transatlantic steamers alive. He had claimed it was because Southampton was a much pleasanter place to arrive at, so Tessa couldn't help being a little disappointed by this. Her first sight of England, it was drearily grey, rain drummed down onto the spires of a distant church, while black smoke rose from the chimneys of ships that stained the already dual-coloured sky. A crowd of people in dark clothes, holding umbrellas, stood on the docks. Tessa strained to see if her brother was among them, but the mist and spray of the ship were too thick for her to make out any individual in great detail. Tessa shivered. The wind off sea was chilly. All of Nate's letters had claimed that London was beautiful, the sun shining every day. Well, Tessa thought hopefully the weather there was better than it was here, because she had no warm clothes with her, nothing more substantial than a woolen shawl that had belonged to Aunt Harriet, and a pair of thin gloves. She had sold most of her clothes to pay for her aunt's funeral, securing the knowledge that her brother would buy her more when she arrived in London to live with him. A shout went up. The maid, its shining black painted hull gleaming wet with rain, had anchored, and tugs were plowing their way through the heaving grey water, ready to carry baggage and passengers to the shore. Passengers streamed off of the ship, clearly desperate to feel land under their feet, so different from their departure from New York. The sky had been blue then, and a brass band had been playing. Though with no one there to wish her goodbye, it had not been a merry occasion. Hunching her shoulders, Tessa joined the disembarking crowd. Draughts of rings stung her unprotected head and neck like pinpricks from icy little needles, and her hands inside their insubstantial gloves were clammy and wet with rain. Reaching the quay, she looked around eagerly, searching for a sight of Nate. It had been nearly 2 weeks since she had spoken to a soul, having kept almost entirely to herself on board the Maine. It would be wonderful to have her brother to talk to again. He wasn't there. The wards were heaped with stacks of luggage and all sorts of boxes and cargo, even mounds of fruit and vegetables wilting and dissolving in the rain. A steamer was departing for Le Havre nearby. Hey, the damp-looking sailors swarmed close to Tessa, shouting in French. She tried to move aside, only to be almost trampled by a throng of disembarking passengers, hurrying for shelter at the railway station. But Nate was nowhere to be seen. "You are Miss Gray?" The voice was guttural, heavily accented. A man had moved to stand in front of Tessa. He was tall, and was wearing a sweeping black coat and a tall hat, its brim collecting rainwater like a cistern. His eyes were peculiarly bulging, almost protuberant, like a frog's, his skin as rough-looking as scar tissue. Tessa had the fight the urge to cringe away from him, but he knew her name. Who here would know her name except someone who knew it too? "Yes?" "Your brother sent me. Come with me." "Where is he?" Tessa demanded, but the man was already walking away. His stride was uneven, as if he had a limp from an old injury. After a moment, Tessa gathered up her skirts and hurried after him. He was wet. He wound through the crowd, moving ahead with purpose, full speed. People jumped aside, muttering about his rudeness as he shouldered past, with Tessa nearly running to keep up. He turned so abruptly around a pile of boxes and came to a halt in front of a large, gleaming black coach Gold letters had been painted across its side, and the rain and mist were too thick for Tessa to read them clearly. The door of the carriage opened, and a woman leaned out. She wore an enormous plumed hat that hid her face. Miss Teresa Gray? Tessa nodded. The bulging-eyed man hurried to help the woman out of the carriage, and then another woman, following after her. Each of them immediately opened an umbrella and raised it, sheltering themselves from the rain. Then they fixed their eyes on Tessa. They were an odd pair. The woman, one was very tall and thin, with a bony, pinched face. Color's hair was scraped back into a chignon at the back of her head. She wore a dress of brilliant violet silk, already spattered here and there with splotches of rain and matching violet gloves. The other woman was short and plump, with small eyes sunk deep into her head. The bright pink gloves stretched over her large hands made them look like colorful claws. Teresa Gray, said the shorter of the two, what a delight to make your acquaintance at last. I am Miss Black, and this is my sister, Miss Dark. Your brother sent us to accompany you to London. Tessa, damp, cold, and baffled, clutched her wet shawl, tied her around herself. I don't understand. Where's Nate? Why didn't he come himself? He was unavoidably detained by business in London. Mortimer's couldn't spare him. He sent ahead a note for you. However, Miss Black had out a rolled-up bit of paper, already dampened with rain. Tessa took it and turned away to read it. It was a short note from her brother, apologizing for not being at the docks to meet her, and letting her know that he trusted Miss Black and Miss Dark. I called them the Dark Sisters, Tessie, for obvious reasons, and they seemed to find the name agreeable. To bring her safely to his house in London, they were, his note said, his landladies as well as trusted friends, and they had his highest recommendation. That decided her. The letter was certainly from Nate. It was in his handwriting, and no one else ever called her Tessie. She swallowed hard and slipped the note into her sleeve, turning back to face the sisters. Very well, she said, fighting down her lingering sense of disappointment. She had been so looking forward to seeing her brother. Shall we call a porter to fetch my trunk? No need. Miss Dark's chief tone was at odds with her pinched gray features. We've already arranged to have it sent on ahead, she snapped, her fingers at the bulging-eyed man who swung himself up into the driver's seat at the front of the carriage. She placed her hand on Tessa's shoulder. Come on, child, let's get you out of the rain. As Tessa moved towards the carriage, propelled by Miss Dark's bony grip, the mist cleared, revealing the gleaming golden image painted on the side of the door. The words, the Pandemonium Club, curled intricately around two snakes, biting each other's tails, forming a circle. Tessa frowned. What does that mean? Nothing you need to worry about, said Miss Black, who had already climbed inside and had her skirts spread across one of the comfortable-looking seats. The inside of the carriage was richly decorated with plush purple velvet bench seats facing each other and gold-tasseled curtains hanging in the windows. Miss Dark helped Tessa up into the carriage, then clambered in behind her. As Tessa settled herself on a bench seat, Miss Black reached to shut the carriage door behind her sister, closing up the gray sky. When she smiled, her teeth gleamed in the dimness as if they were made of metal. Do settle in, Teresa. We've a long ride ahead of us. Tessa put a hand to the Clockwork Angel at her throat, taking comfort in its steady ticking as the carriage lurched forward in the rain. Okay, everyone, that was the end of the prologue. I know I said chapter 1 at the start, but the prologue took me 18 minutes to read, so we're going to leave it at that for today. I hope you enjoyed the Clockwork Angel so far. I will be reading other books by Cassandra Clare also, so stay tuned for those. Bye!